do a lot this summer. I told people what I did was manage teenagers. It's all right, it's my job. And they're all going to be gone in 9 days. I've got my priorities straight. But I had a few getaways. And for some reason, one of the images that I experienced this summer really imprinted itself on me. Let me share it with you. I was in a small lake town at an establishment, having a meal with entertainment. It was a summer experience. And there was an entertainer, and he was kind of wild and crazy, and there was a dance floor, but you know how it is, like the dance floor stays empty for a while, doesn't it? Till people have maybe another drink. But it was a family establishment as well, and right behind me was this table. And some of the people at this table mesmerized me. There was a grandmother, and a grandfather, and a daughter and a son-in-law, and 5 grandchildren, all at the same table. And I had a hard time taking my eyes off of this grandmother. Because frankly, she didn't look like any grandmother I'd ever known. She was, I think, well into her 80s. And she was dressed like Roanna, and she could pull it off. And she had the most sparkly eyes. Her husband was tall, and you could tell that some arthritis had already set in. And I just kept on looking over, because there's something about her, the way that she carried her age, that I just thought, boy, if I'm 70, with that kind of grace and energy and flashing eyes, I will be grateful. And then, she kind of got up sometime into the evening, and she could barely walk. She could barely walk. I thought, wow. And then her husband got up, and her husband could barely walk. And then the music kind of morphed into that set, that starts with Rock Around the Clock, right? And I'm just catching her out of the corner of my eye. And she just gave this very subtle glance to her husband. The kind of... And before you know it, this couple, well into their 80s, who could barely walk, are just rocking around the clock on the dance floor. Now, that in itself, for me, is an inspiring image. But they took it one step further. They each grabbed their grandchildren's hands. And before you knew it, they were dancing with all 5 of their grandchildren. And 3 of them were boys and teenagers. And there was such joy. And I thought to myself, these kids are going to remember this night forever. Just that day, I had been talking to a young man who has a very different grandmother. She, I think, is a wonderful woman who has this incredibly strong connection with her community of faith. She has been involved in ministry a lot of her life, camping ministries, women's ministries. She has hosted many people in her home. At 85, she is still a going concern. But she has another concern, and that's her 25-year-old grandson, who doesn't go to church. And every time they meet, she kind of just, subtly or not, gets on his case. And he's been unemployed for a while. He's 25. That's what 25 years old are these days, isn't it? And she kind of hints that maybe, just maybe, if he made himself right with the Lord or got himself back into church, that his life would turn around. And just listening to kind of the subtle, very gracious grief with which he speaks about his grandmother. He doesn't want to fight with her. He doesn't really need to disagree with her. But he just says, she just doesn't understand that I would die if I went back to that place. A tale of two grandmothers in just a snippet of an evening and a conversation in an afternoon. And I just carried that with me for a while and thought, wow, why is this so profound for me? Why can't I get this dancing family out of my mind? And I thought, what would be the invitation of our tradition? If I were to go back and look through the pages of our ancient texts, where is it that this dancing grandmother is held up as just the saint? And so I went back to this foundational invitation. Love the Lord your God with all your might and soul and spirit. And I thought, I think we need to say that a little differently, because that, in fact, is the demand of the second grandmother to her grandson. If you would just love the Lord your God with all your heart, then your life would be better. So why don't we try this on for size, and I'm just going to let you think about it and leave it with you. What if in this era, when we no longer understand as God as being on some sort of throne, or God as being some eternal father, but somehow have moved to a place of understanding God as the one in whom we live and move and have our being. So Paul, the Apostle Paul, actually got that. But somehow this mystery of love and joy and creative energy in whom we live and breathe and have our being. So that we might even say that God is like life itself. And if that is the case, then maybe the invitation to each of us that I could see coming so clearly through that grandmother is to love your life with your heart and your soul and your mind and your strength. And then the second invitation that I think that dancing grandmother got so right, maybe the other grandmother didn't quite get so right, was to create the context for your family, your neighbor, your friends around the world to love their life as well. So that grandmother was hauling those kids onto the dance floor and inviting them to love those moments of life with her. Whereas the grandmother that was inviting the grandson to love God was really at the same time inviting him to shut down his life. I think about our journey as a circle of friends at St. Andrew's and the kind of community we've tried to create and kind of global community we seek to be part of. I think of Reaching for Rainbows, where we have created the context for these girls to love their lives. Where we've partnered with artisans in the developing world that didn't have much of a life to love until they were given a living wage to provide their kids with shelter and education and food. So, what is the ancient invitation? Is to love your life, your heart and mind and soul, and to create the context so that other people can love their lives with their heart and mind and soul. No judgment. So here's my question to you. What's getting in the way of you loving your life? What's getting in the way of you enjoying this mystery, this eternal dance we've been called to participate in? What doors do you need to fling open? What hang-ups do you need to let go of? What belief system are you stuck in that is choking your breath? Because it's grand, isn't it? It's grand, and every once in a while, you need someone who's been around a long time to get up on the dance floor, break all the rules, and say, I'm rocking around the clock all night.